They kicked the black woman out. Next day, her billionaire husband shows up in a Rolls Royce. "Ma'am, I think you might be lost." The sentence hung in the air like smog, the kind that clogs your throat, burns your eyes, and lingers long after you try to forget it. Amira Jenkins stood still in the pristine, overly air-conditioned lobby of Redwood Elite Motors in Miami, her eyes locked on the sleek, graphite gray coupe displayed on the raised platform in the center of the showroom. Her hand still gripped the brochure she had picked up seconds ago. "Excuse me?" she asked, trying to mask the sting behind her question. The man in front of her, Bryce Harrison, didn't flinch. He looked exactly like the kind of person this place would promote, young, confident, smug. His navy suit was cut so sharp it could slice paper, and his name tag gleamed like it had just been polished. "I said, I think you might be in the wrong place. These cars aren't for window shopping," he said, lowering his voice just enough to make the implication sharper. Amira blinked. Once, twice. Her pulse slowed, her spine straightened. She was wearing a white tee, jeans, and a pair of Converse she'd had since college. She knew exactly how she looked, and that was the point. She hadn't come here to impress anyone. She came here to buy a car. For her sister. "I'm looking to purchase that vehicle," she said, nodding toward the coupe. Bryce followed her gaze, then let out a small, humorless chuckle. "That model starts at $280,000. Fully equipped, it's north of $310,000. Look, if you're interested in something more realistic, our pre-owned lot is around the block." Across the showroom, a couple dressed in designer clothing walked in. Bryce's demeanor shifted instantly. He straightened, smoothed his tie, and waved them over. "Mr. and Mrs. Logan, welcome back. The limited edition Bentley is ready for viewing," he said, his voice now dripping with enthusiasm. Amira stood in place, invisible again. Another salesperson, a younger man named Jordan, offered a hesitant smile in her direction, but didn't approach. "You know what?" she said to no one in particular, voice calm. "You don't have to worry. I've seen enough." As she turned to leave, Bryce called out, "Be sure to grab a brochure. They make great vision boards." Laughter erupted somewhere behind her. It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. It pierced just the same. She didn't look back. She didn't give them the satisfaction. 2 hours later, Amira sat at the kitchen island of her Coral Gables home, sipping on lukewarm peppermint tea she had no intention of finishing. Sunlight filtered through the skylights above, casting long streaks across the granite counters. But the glow outside didn't reach her face. Darius Cole walked in, tie loosened, laptop bag in one hand, a slight furrow already forming between his brows the moment he saw her. "You're home early," he said, placing the bag down and walking toward her. "Yeah. Didn't take as long as I thought." He paused, studied her. "You okay?" She shrugged. "Went to Redwood Elite Motors. Thought I found the perfect car for Jasmine." Darius nodded. "The coupe you bookmarked last week." "That's the one." He poured himself a glass of water but didn't take a sip. "And?" She smiled, but it was thin. "Apparently, I look like someone who shops for dreams, not keys." Darius didn't say anything for a moment. He simply leaned on the counter, eyes steady on hers. "Say that again." Amira recounted everything. The dismissiveness, the laughter, the subtle snickers, the public humiliation. But she did it with the same composure she'd mastered over years of being underestimated, overlooked, or assumed to be anything but who she was. When she finished, Darius let out a slow breath. He leaned back and crossed his arms. "And you didn't correct them?" "Would it have changed anything if I had?" His silence answered her question. "They didn't see me," she said. "Just another black woman in jeans and sneakers." He finally sipped his water. "Well, maybe it's time they learn how to see." She raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking you tried to buy a car, he said, walking toward his phone on the charger. Now I want to buy the lesson. The next morning at exactly 9:43 a.m., the roar of a V12 engine turned heads on, Northwest 36th Street. A midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled into the parking lot of Redwood Elite Motors. Heads turned, phones came out. Jordan was the first to spot it. He whispered, "What the hell?" Bryce looked up from his desk, mid-conversation with another couple. "Is that—" The driver, a man in tailored black, stepped out and opened the rear door with practiced precision. Out stepped Darius Cole. No introduction, no dramatic flair. Just presence. Bryce's jaw twitched. He didn't recognize him right away. Not until Darius looked him dead in the eye and said calmly, "You met my wife yesterday." Jordan dropped his pen. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thunder in disguise. The air in the Westbridge Auto Gallery was thick with pride. Sleek glass walls reflected the rows of luxury vehicles lined up like soldiers, each polished to an impossible gleam. Inside, under the hum of subtle jazz and the low murmur of customer voices, sales manager Chase Winfield adjusted the cuffs of his blazer and glanced at the front entrance, where sunlight spilled across the floor like a red carpet. He just finished lecturing the junior sales team about client profiling. He believed in the importance of reading people: shoes, posture, tone of voice. He claimed you could tell everything you needed to know before they even opened their mouths. "Trust your instinct," he said. "Not everyone who walks in here is here to buy. Some just want a taste of what they can't afford." Just as the words settled, the glass doors slid open. A woman stepped through, black, early 30s, athletic build, wearing black joggers, a denim jacket over a clean white tee, and her natural curls pulled into a loose puff. Her face was fresh, no makeup, and her only accessory was a slim leather wallet in one hand. Chase barely looked up. But behind the reception desk, Ruby, the receptionist, straightened. Something about the woman's walk said confidence, not confusion. But Chase didn't see it. What he saw was someone out of place. "Can I help you?" he called from halfway across the floor, not bothering to approach. The woman gave a tight smile and walked up to him. "Hi, I'm looking for someone to show me the McLaren GT you've got listed on your site. Midnight purple, V8 twin turbo." That caught Chase off guard. He narrowed his eyes. "That car starts at $230,000. We usually show it by appointment." "I understand," she replied evenly. "I'm here now and I'm prepared to make a decision today." Chase tilted his head slightly. "You're prepared?" She nodded and handed over a neatly folded sheet, her name, Ava Monroe, and the listing printed out with a handwritten VIN circled. Attached to it was proof of funds from a personal account at a private bank in Boston. Chase barely glanced at it. He folded his arms. "I'm going to be honest, Ms. Monroe. We've had issues lately. People coming in off the street, wasting time. If you're serious, maybe you should come back with a consultant or someone who handles your finances." Ava blinked. "You mean like a husband?" she asked, voice sharp but still controlled. "I mean someone. A little more in the know," Chase said, walking toward the reception desk, brushing her off. "Ruby can give you a brochure." Ava didn't move. She looked down at her papers, then up again. "That's a shame," she said quietly, "because I did come prepared, and this was going to be a surprise gift." Ruby looked between the two of them, clearly uncomfortable. She opened her mouth to speak, but Chase waved her off. "We've got appointments today, Ms. Monroe. Feel free to browse, but if you're not purchasing today—" "I said I was ready today," Ava interrupted, her voice still even. "I don't need to browse. I told you exactly what I wanted, and I just handed you proof of funding." Chase rolled his eyes. "Listen, this dealership operates on relationships, Trust, reputation. It's not personal, it's just, you don't look like our typical buyer. The words hung in the air. The nearby showroom floor seemed to go quieter. A few customers glanced over. One of the younger salesmen, Tony, stood frozen near a Porsche Taycan, clearly caught in the awkwardness of it all. Ava stared at Chase, then folded her papers back into her wallet. She smiled. This time it wasn't polite. It was tight, calculated. "Understood," she said. And with that she turned and walked out. No raised voice, no scene, no last word. Just silence. But Ruby saw it. The flicker of something behind Ava's calm eyes. Not defeat. Not even anger. Something quieter. Sharper. Like a thread had just been pulled in her mind. And it would unravel everything. That night, Chase told the story over beers with a few friends. He made it into a joke. She walked in looking like she just came from the gym, wanted to test drive a McLaren. Can you believe that? His friends laughed. One raised a brow. What if she was serious? Then she can come back with someone who looks the part, Chase replied, sipping his IPA. This is a luxury dealership, not a used lot. But back in the city, Ava Monroe was having dinner with her husband, Miles Holloway, the founder and CEO of Holloway Strategic, one of the top infrastructure investment firms in the country. They sat on their terrace, the Boston skyline gleaming behind them. Ava didn't speak of what happened right away, but when she did, Miles put down his fork slowly. "Let me guess," he said. "They looked at you and decided you weren't worth their time." Ava nodded. Miles didn't react with rage, just the kind of slow, settled silence that always came before he made a move. He poured himself a drink, then turned to her. "Do you want me to handle it?" he asked. Ava shook her head. "Number, but I want them to remember my name. Not just because of the money, because of the lesson." Miles smiled. "Then let's give them a lesson they'll never forget." The next morning, Westbridge Auto Gallery would open like any other day. But nothing would be the same after what rolled into their parking lot at exactly 9:58 a.m. And by 10:01, Chase Winfield would forget everything he thought he knew about judging people by their appearance. Because sometimes the people you dismiss most easily are the ones holding your future in their hands. Chase Winfield didn't sleep well. Something about the woman's calm composure unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't what she wore or how she carried herself. It was the way she looked at him after he dismissed her, like she was collecting information, not emotion, like she'd seen this 100 times and already knew how it would end. Still, Chase had written it off. People bluff all the time. Fancy talk, fake confidence. Half of them barely get approved for financing. But something about Ava Monroe's last glance lingered with him through the night. At 9:57 the next morning, Chase was mid-sip on his second espresso when he heard the sound. It wasn't loud. It was smooth, subtle, the unmistakable purr of a custom-built engine tuned for performance and elegance. Even before he looked, he knew it wasn't one of their showroom cars. Outside the massive front windows, a car unlike any he'd seen before pulled into the dealership's front circle. Rolls-Royce Phantom. But not just any Phantom. Extended wheelbase. Midnight black paint that shimmered violet when the sunlight hit it. Just right. Chrome accents so polished they caught every angle of the building's glass facade. The kind of car you didn't just buy. The kind of car you commissioned. Inside, the dealership fell quiet. Salesmen stopped mid-conversation. Tony nudged Ruby at the reception desk. Chase stepped forward, heart quickening. He forced himself to adjust his tie, resetting his confident exterior. "VIP client," he muttered to himself. The car door opened. A chauffeur in tailored charcoal gray stepped out and walked smoothly to the rear door, opening it with a respectful bow. From the back stepped a tall man in a steel blue suit, the kind that fit like it was sewn onto him. Bald head, sharp jaw, mahogany skin. He wore no jewelry, just a sleek black watch. He didn't need to say anything. His presence alone did the talking. The man took 3 steps toward the glass doors. Chase rushed to meet him. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Westbridge Auto Gallery. My name is Chase Winfield, sales manager. It's an honor." The man's eyes didn't even flick toward Chase. His voice, when it came, was calm and deep. "I'm here about the McLaren GT." "Of course," Chase said quickly, motioning toward the showroom floor. "You've got great taste. We have one of the only midnight purples left on the East Coast." The man stopped walking. "I'm aware," he said. "My wife was here yesterday. She asked to see that very car." Chase froze mid-step. I'm not sure I recall." "She came alone," the man continued, "wearing jeans, a white tee. Her name is Ava Monroe." Chase's face paled slightly. The man extended his hand. "Miles Holloway." There it was. That name. It dropped like a weight in Chase's gut. Not from fear, yet, but from recognition. Holloway Strategic, Energy Tech Infrastructure, Forbes, Wall Street Journal. The man in front of him wasn't just a wealthy customer. He was one of the richest men in the state, and he was the husband of the woman Chase had humiliated less than 24 hours ago. "I believe," Miles said, still calm, "you told her the McLaren was appointment only." Chase swallowed hard. "Yes, I may have. There may have been a misunderstanding. I'm deeply sorry. If she's interested, of course, we'd be happy to revisit." "She was interested yesterday," Miles said. "You weren't." His words sliced through the lobby. Across the floor, the other staff had stopped pretending to work. Ruby turned away from her desk, slowly removing her headset. Tony was standing still, eyes wide. "I came here to finish what she started," Miles said, walking toward the McLaren. "But not just for the car." Chase tried to recover. "Absolutely, sir. We'll get you with our top finance team, and I'm paying in full," Miles said, not turning around. "No finance team needed." Chase was speechless. "And one more thing," Miles added, now standing beside the car, fingers trailing across its flawless hood. "I'm not just buying this McLaren." Chase blinked. "You're not?" Miles turned. "I'm buying 6 vehicles today for my firm's executive team, a gesture of appreciation, and I'm doing it with the salesman who didn't treat my wife like she didn't belong." Chase's head whipped around. Ruby's eyes met his briefly, full of quiet satisfaction. "Tony," Miles called. The young salesman nearly jumped. Yes, sir," Miles smiled. "You're going to help me with the purchase, starting with the Midnight Purple GT." Tony's face flushed. "Of course. Thank you, sir. It would be an honor." Chase opened his mouth, but no words came, just the weight of what had just slipped through his fingers. As Miles and Tony walked toward the executive office, Ruby leaned across the counter and whispered to Chase, "Guess instincts don't always pay off." Chase stood frozen. Behind him, the phone started ringing. He didn't move. In his head, he kept replaying her name, Ava Monroe, the woman he'd dismissed without a second thought, the woman whose quiet walk out of the dealership had just become the loudest message of his career. Ruby didn't usually speak up in staff meetings. She was good at her job, knew her numbers, handled clients with ease. But when it came to internal politics, she stayed out of it. That morning, though, as Chase paced the front of the conference room, trying to salvage whatever pride he had left, she couldn't keep her mouth shut. "We need to talk about what happened yesterday," she said, arms crossed, voice firm. Chase stopped mid-sentence, clearly irritated. "We're talking about it now. Mr. Holloway was treated poorly. That's not how we do business." "No," Ruby said, meeting his eyes. "His wife was treated poorly. And you were the one who did it." Murmurs spread across the table. Tony glanced down at the table, unsure whether to jump in or stay silent. Chase narrowed his eyes. Look, we all make mistakes in customer profiling. Profiling, Ruby shot back. You mean judgment, disrespect. You didn't just brush her off, you humiliated her in front of other customers. Chase's face tightened. That's enough, Ruby. No, she said. It's not. The room went quiet. Chase turned to the general manager, Carl Abrams, who'd been silent in the corner of the room, listening closely. Carl, Chase said, trying to regain control, we handled the fallout. Mr. Holloway's happy now. Let's not drag this out. Carl leaned forward. Actually, Chase, we do need to drag this out. Chase's stomach dropped. Carl continued, I got a call this morning from Miles Holloway's office. He's not only buying the fleet, he's also inviting the dealership to partner in a new social equity initiative, training for unconscious bias, community outreach, a scholarship fund for students of color interested in automotive careers, the staff murmured, impressed. Chase forced a smile. Well, that's great news. Carl wasn't smiling. He also requested that Tony personally handle the fleet transactions, and that you, Chase, participate in the first round of community training as a student, not a speaker. A few jaws dropped. Chase sat back in his chair, stunned. That's not necessary. It wasn't a request, Carl said. He was very clear. Ruby didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The point had already been made, loud and clear. Later that day, Chase stood at his desk, staring out the window as a sleek SUV from Holloway Strategic pulled into the lot. Out stepped a sharply dressed woman in her 30s, clipboard in hand, her movements precise, no nonsense. She made her way straight toward the building. Ruby met her first. Hi, the woman said. My name's Renee Holloway, Miles's sister. I'm here to coordinate the partnership. We'll be using your showroom for our launch event. It'll be filmed. There will be press. Ruby extended her hand. We're ready. Renee glanced at Chase, who had turned around slowly to face her. You must be Chase, she said. He nodded, suddenly unsure of his usual salesman charm. Renee raised an eyebrow. You'll be on camera for part of this. Talking about your role in how we got here. Just letting you know in advance. Is that necessary? He asked, voice low. Renee stared at him for a long beat. Number, but it's appropriate. Later that evening, Ava sat on her back porch, a warm mug of tea in her hand as the sun dipped low behind the trees. She was still dressed casually, but her posture had changed, more grounded, more steady. Miles stepped out, a quiet presence behind her. You were right, she said before he spoke. It had to be addressed. He came around and sat next to her. You weren't looking for revenge. You were asking for respect. Ava nodded slowly. It's exhausting, though, always having to prove you belong. Even now. He reached for her hand. You shouldn't have to prove anything, he said. But if they're going to look, then we'll make sure they see everything. She smiled faintly, the kind that said she appreciated the support, but still carried the weight of years of similar moments. I don't want them to fear us, she said. I want them to learn. Miles paused. Well, learning's definitely happening. Their showroom is hosting a workshop in 2 weeks. You'll be the keynote speaker. Ava blinked. What? You've been asked to speak. By name, she let out a short laugh, then shook her head. Miles, they need to hear it, he said. From you. Ava didn't respond right away. Then she set her mug down and looked toward the darkening horizon. Then I guess I better start writing something that makes them remember. And in that quiet, the transformation wasn't in the dealership or the people who'd wronged her. It was in the moment Ava realized she didn't need a Rolls-Royce or a billionaire husband to be heard. She only needed to speak. Ava stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her navy blue blouse. Her hair was pulled back in a soft twist, her earrings small and elegant. Her expression, though calm, was layered. She wasn't nervous. Not exactly, but today was going to be different. Downstairs, Miles was on a call, pacing by the living room window. She could hear his voice steady, measured, but with a familiar sharpness. He was preparing the final details for the Holloway Foundation's community initiative, one that would begin right in the dealership that had disrespected her just days earlier. "You ready?" he asked as she descended the stairs. Ava nodded. "As I'll ever be." Outside, the black SUV waited, sleek and quiet. The driver opened the door and the two climbed in. Neither said much. They didn't need to. There was an understanding between them now, silent, powerful, and unshakable. Meanwhile, at Parkview Elite Motors, the mood was more tense. Chase stood stiffly in the corner of the showroom, watching the staff hustle around, setting up folding chairs and banners. Ruby was overseeing the staging with her usual poise, clipboard in hand, while a media crew from a local news station finished setting up lights. The entire front display had been cleared out to make room for the event. The dealership's glass facade reflected the morning sun, but inside the mood was clouded by nerves. Carl, the general manager, approached Chase. "Don't fidget," Carl said under his breath. "Just act like you've been part of this from the start." Chase snorted softly. "Except I wasn't." "That's not the point today," Carl replied. "The point is making it right." A hush fell over the room as the doors opened, and in walked Ava and Miles. This time Ava wore her identity like armor. Not flashy, but powerful in its clarity. She wasn't there to perform or prove. She was there to speak truth. And everyone in the building felt it. Chase straightened involuntarily, trying to muster a smile that felt more like a wince. Ruby met Ava first, her expression warm and welcoming. "We're honored you're here," Ruby said sincerely. "Thank you," Ava replied. "Let's get to it." After some brief introductions, the event began. Carl stepped to the front with a mic in hand, clearing his throat. "We're gathered here not just as a business," he said, "but as people learning how to do better. Today is about accountability, reflection, and change, and there's no better voice to help us start that journey than Ava Holloway." The applause was light, uncertain. Ava took the mic with grace, stepping forward as if the moment belonged to her. And it did. "When I walked into this dealership a few days ago," she began, "I came to ask about a car. That's it. I wasn't looking for trouble and I wasn't testing anyone. I was just a black woman in jeans and a t-shirt, asking questions, and I was dismissed." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Not because I was rude, not because I was disruptive, but because someone assumed I didn't belong here." A few heads turned in Chase's direction. He felt the heat creeping up his neck. "But I'm not here to talk about embarrassment," Ava continued. "I'm here to talk about what happens next, because the truth is this kind of thing doesn't just happen to me. It happens to people every day. People without a billionaire husband, people without a platform." Now the silence in the room was charged, present. Everyone was listening. "And what's worse," she said, voice firm but steady, "is that it happens so often, many of us just swallow it. We don't make a scene. We walk out with our dignity intact, but our spirit chipped away." Ava scanned the room, her eyes landing on Chase briefly. "But today is not about shame. It's about change." She stepped back slightly and gestured to the screen behind her. A short video began to play. Images of kids in wheelchairs playing basketball, families in need receiving support, testimonials from small business owners given a shot by the Holloway Foundation. "This," she said as the video ended, "is what it looks like when we invest in people instead of profiles, when we open doors instead of closing them, Applause broke out, real, growing louder. Even Carl clapped, visibly moved. Then she did something unexpected. "I want to thank someone today," Ava said. "Not my husband, not my team, but Daniel, one of your junior sales staff. He saw me that day, he listened, he didn't talk over me or talk down to me, and that matters." Daniel, caught off guard, looked up from the back row, stunned. "You reminded me," she said to him, "that kindness doesn't need a title, just character." People began turning to Daniel, giving him nods, pats on the shoulder. Chase, still standing stiffly, looked down. Later, as people mingled, Ruby pulled Ava aside. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," Ava said. "Why did you come back?" Ava took a moment. "Because if I didn't, they'd think silence meant agreement. And because I needed them to see that I'm not the exception. I'm just the one who said something." Chase hovered nearby, and finally, he stepped forward. "Ava," he said awkwardly. "Mrs. Holloway, I want to apologize again. I handled it wrong." She looked at him evenly. "You didn't handle me wrong. You judged me wrong. And that's a bigger problem." He swallowed hard. "I understand now." "I hope you do," she said, "but understanding isn't the same as doing better. Let's see if you can do both." Then she turned and walked back to Miles, who was already speaking with the press. Chase didn't follow. He just stood there, realizing that apology wasn't something you said once and moved on from. It was something you lived out, one day at a time. And that day, the learning had only just begun. The air inside Parkview Elite Motors felt tighter the following week. Conversations were shorter. Eye contact was rare, and beneath the polished smiles and stiff name tags, an uneasy awareness had taken root. No one could pretend nothing had happened, especially not Chase. He had replayed that moment, Ava's speech, Daniel being thanked, the look in Ruby's eyes when she passed him without a word, dozens of times in his head. But it wasn't just guilt, it was clarity, and it was heavy. He'd spent years convincing himself that how someone dressed, how they walked in, whether they used the right lingo, these were all harmless filters, necessary tools in sales, efficiency, professionalism. But now all he saw was the mirror, and he didn't like the reflection. On Thursday, Chase stayed late, long after the lights dimmed and the last client left. He pulled the inventory sheets for the Azure Ava had once pointed to, the one he'd brushed off like it was some impossible fantasy. He stared at it, still available, still gleaming on the platform near the entrance. Untouched, Ruby walked by on her way out and paused when she saw him. "Working late?" He looked up. "Just catching up." She nodded but didn't move. "I was hard on you," she said after a beat. Chase closed the file slowly. "You weren't wrong." Ruby shifted her weight. "I've known you a long time. You're good at what you do, but good sales instincts mean nothing if they're built on assumptions." He swallowed, nodded. "I meant what I said the other day," Ruby continued. "You don't get to decide who belongs and who doesn't, especially not here." Chase looked down. "I know, I was wrong. Fully." "Do something about it then," she said simply, and walked away. Friday morning brought something new. Carl, the general manager, had called an all-staff meeting before doors opened. Every associate, every admin, every cleaner was there. It wasn't like their usual quarterly briefings. No donuts, no laminated talking points. Carl stood near the entrance, holding a manila folder and a hard stare. "We're not going to pretend last week didn't happen," he said bluntly. "What happened to Mrs. Holloway, how she was treated, was unacceptable." Some staff nodded. A few others shifted uncomfortably. "We've been pushing for high-volume sales, premium customers, big-dollar accounts, and somewhere along the way we stopped seeing people." Chase lowered his eyes. He knew this was for him, but he didn't flinch. Effective immediately, we're launching a required training series. Unconscious bias, inclusive customer experience, cultural competency. I don't care if you've sold 100 luxury cars. If you can't treat every single person with respect, you don't belong on this floor. Carl let that hang for a moment. But we're not just saying sorry. We're going to show it. That afternoon, the dealership partnered with the Holloway Foundation to co-host a car clinic for underserved youth in the community, showcasing careers in automotive technology, finance, and entrepreneurship. Miles had suggested it during a brief conversation with Carl after Ava's speech. If you want to make this right, help someone else who's been told no all their life. The garage space in the back was transformed. Workbenches, demo stations, mock interviews, even a virtual design simulator. Local high schoolers were bussed in, some wide-eyed, some skeptical, but all of them curious. Ava arrived just after noon. She wore a red blouse this time, no blazer, her curls out and shining in the sunlight. She walked in like she belonged, because she did, and this time, nobody questioned it. Chase saw her from across the garage. He'd volunteered to run one of the resume coaching tables, something outside his comfort zone. He watched her interact with a group of students, laughing with them, correcting one boy's posture playfully as he mock-interviewed with Ruby. He wasn't sure if he should approach, but he did. "Ava." She turned, recognition soft in her eyes. "Chase," she greeted, her voice even. "I wanted to say, thank you. For coming. For doing this. You didn't have to." She tilted her head. "You're right, I didn't. But I did it for the kids. For the ones who won't be dismissed the way I was." He nodded. "I deserved everything you said. Every look, every silence." Ava studied him. "And what are you going to do with it?" He took a breath. "Keep showing up, not just at events like this, but in the way I treat people, the way I listen. Learn." She smiled, small but sincere. "Then let that be your apology." Later that evening, as the last group of students boarded their bus, Ava walked the showroom floor alone. The azure still sat gleaming under a spotlight. She ran her fingers lightly across the edge of the door. From behind her, Miles appeared, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Still thinking about Caroline?" he asked. "She would have loved this car," Ava said, "but it's not about the car anymore." "No," he agreed. "It's about what it made possible." They stood there, just the two of them, in a room that had once rejected her, now transformed, if only a little. The change wasn't complete, but it had begun, and that, for now, was enough. Saturday morning in Cambridge was quieter than usual, blanketed by an early spring drizzle that misted the air and blurred the outlines of the city. But inside the Collins estate, things were humming with a quiet, deliberate intensity. Ava stood in her office watching the rain streak down the large windows, a steaming mug of hibiscus tea cupped in her hands. Her phone buzzed once, an incoming message from the Holloway Foundation's comms team. Final press release approved. Boston Luxury Motors has agreed to sponsor the Youth Mobility Project, funding 5 full-ride automotive tech scholarships. Press hits expected Monday. Ava let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was working. Not just the reckoning, but the rebuilding. Across the house, Miles was seated at the kitchen table, still in sweats, reviewing paperwork from the Foundation's expansion. When Ava entered, he looked up, offering her a smile as he slid a folder across the table. "You've got to see this." She glanced over the contents. 3 handwritten letters from teens who'd attended the dealership's career clinic just 2 days earlier. One wrote, "I didn't think someone who looked like me could belong in a place like that. But I do now." Ava blinked once, twice, feeling something settle deep in her chest. "I was wrong," she said quietly. Miles raised a brow. About what? About whether showing up would change anything. About whether speaking out would even matter. I thought I was just venting, but it mattered. To more than just me. Miles nodded. Change doesn't always come from shouting. Sometimes it starts with someone refusing to walk out the same door they were kicked out of. She smiled, setting the letters down. Later that day, they returned to the dealership, not to make a point, not for appearances, but for a private delivery. Daniel had called earlier in the week. The azure coupe, freshly detailed and tagged, was ready. Ava had decided it would still be the perfect gift for her sister, but this time she wasn't walking in alone. When they arrived, the entire energy inside Boston Luxury Motors had shifted. Chase was there. So was Ruby. So was Carl, standing near the entrance, ready to greet them not as exceptions but with respect. Daniel approached first, beaming. "Mrs. Holloway, Mr. Collins, it's all set." He handed her the keys with 2 hands, as if presenting a medal. His gratitude was unspoken, but clear in every movement. "You did good, Daniel," Ava said warmly. "Thanks to you," he replied. Behind them, Chase lingered, clearly unsure whether to approach. Ava noticed. She turned. "I heard you helped mentor Daniel through the process," she said. Chase nodded, swallowing. "He taught me a few things, too." Ava tilted her head, soft but firm. "I hope you're not just trying to make this right. I hope you're working to make it better." Chase held her gaze. Both. Before she could respond, the sound of a camera shutter clicked from the other side of the room. A photographer from the Boston Chronicle had arrived quietly, sent by the Foundation to capture the handoff for their internal newsletter. But the image he captured was more than just a car being delivered. It was Ava, Daniel, and Miles, standing in front of the sleek, deep blue Azure, sunlight cutting through the clouds and gleaming off the hood. It looked less like a transaction and more like a turning point. Later that evening, back at home, Ava received a text from someone unexpected. Unknown number. "I don't expect a response, but I wanted you to know I've started volunteering at the adaptive sports program. Thomas asked me to coach a wheelchair basketball scrimmage next week. I'm learning to listen, truly listen. Thank you. Blake." She stared at the message for a long moment. Miles, who was watching her from the other side of the room, finally asked, "Blake?" She nodded, still quiet. "What did he say?" She handed him the phone. Miles read the message, then handed it back with a single comment. "Good. Let him work for his redemption." Ava didn't reply. She simply tapped the screen, saving the message, then setting the phone down. The world doesn't always change with a bang. Sometimes it shifts in small ways. In a car handed to a sister who survived something unthinkable. In a salesman learning how to see again. In a man coaching kids he once ignored. And sometimes in the quiet breath a woman takes when she finally feels seen, not because of who she married or what she owns, but because of who she chose to be. Tomorrow would be a new day. But tonight, Ava Holloway finally rested. The Collins Foundation Gala lit up the Boston Harbor skyline like a constellation. Inside the glass-paneled event center, the atmosphere was electric. Children in formal wear grinned beside adaptive sports demonstrations. Donors laughed softly over glasses of wine, and a string quartet played an upbeat tune that gave the entire evening a feeling of celebration rather than charity. Ava Holloway stood near the central exhibit, a fully customized adaptive driving simulator donated by her foundation. She watched a young girl with cerebral palsy try it out, her face breaking into a wide smile as the virtual car responded to her hand controls. That smile alone, Ava thought, made every ounce of the past week worth it. Behind her, Miles approached, dressed in a tailored gray suit, no tie, his presence casual but commanding. He offered her a glass of sparkling water. Your work is all over this place, he said, glancing around. So is yours, Ava replied, but neither of us really did it alone. They clinked glasses lightly. The noise of the gala faded for a moment in their shared silence. A few feet away, Daniel was deep in conversation with a group of local high school students interested in automotive engineering. He spoke with ease now, no longer the nervous young man from weeks ago. His eyes lit up as he explained how an engine works in adaptive vehicles. Blake Thompson stood a little further back. Tonight, he wore the same staff vest as the volunteers, not a tailored suit. He wasn't pretending to be part of the elite. He was working. He helped escort guests, handed out brochures, and, most importantly, listened. Ava had noticed his transformation, slow but real. He didn't seek credit. He didn't speak loudly. He simply showed up, and kept showing up. Near the end of the night, Blake approached her hesitantly. "Mrs. Holloway," he began, his voice softer than usual. "Blake," she acknowledged. He took a breath. "I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for the second chance, but for not letting me stay who I was." She tilted her head. "You didn't need me for that. You just needed a mirror." He gave a small nod. "Still, most people would have written me off." "I almost did," she said honestly. "But something told me you weren't beyond learning." Blake looked away, eyes settling on Thomas, the boy in the wheelchair now leading a group of younger kids through a basketball warm-up. "He thinks I'm cool," Blake said with a faint smile. "Then you better keep living up to that," Ava replied. As Blake walked away, Miles rejoined her. "You gonna tell him?" "Tell him what?" "That he was the final test, that how he treated others after being humbled was what mattered most." Ava shook her head. "He doesn't need to know. He just needs to keep doing it." The evening wound down, but the energy in the room didn't. Guests lingered longer than expected. Many signed up for future volunteering, donations rolled in well past projections, and several corporate sponsors requested follow-up meetings with the foundation. When the last of the guests finally left, Ava and Miles stood at the top of the ballroom stairs, surveying the now empty space. "You think they'll remember this?" she asked. "I think they'll remember how they felt tonight," Miles said. "And that's what changes people." Outside, the Rolls-Royce waited silently, its midnight blue paint reflecting the soft glow of the parking lot lights. Not as a symbol of power, but of presence, of choosing to return, not with anger, but with purpose. Before heading out, Ava turned to Daniel, who had been helping pack up. "One more thing," she said. Daniel straightened. "Yes? You ready to take the lead on that school program expansion?" He blinked. "Seriously? You've earned it." His smile was immediate, full of disbelief and pride. "I won't let you down. I know." Later, as the Rolls pulled away from the venue, Ava leaned her head against the window and exhaled. Her reflection stared back, strong, calm, and no longer carrying the weight of having to prove herself. Because she hadn't just walked back into that dealership to demand respect. She had returned to redefine it. And in doing so, she hadn't just reclaimed her dignity. She had rewritten the script for every person who had ever been judged by their cover. If this story spoke to you, if it reminded you that strength doesn't always roar but sometimes walks in quiet determination, then share it. Let others feel it too. And don't forget to subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. Stories where justice finds its way not through fury, but through clarity, courage, and the unwavering belief that no one gets to decide your worth based on what they see.